Welcome back to Derry Public Radio. Reporting from the basement of the Derry Civic Center, this is Joshua Kahn with the news. The super flu epidemic has come to Derry and holds us in its phlegmy grasp. As the station's designated safety cadet, I was able to quarantine our studio to protect the health of everyone at risk. I have isolated the sick and dying from the healthy station populace, and I will be doing everything in my power to keep us on the air. I only hope there are still living people out there to hear it. You're listening to Derry Public Radio.
This is Derry Public Radio.
Welcome back to Derry Public Radio, a bi-weekly Stephen King book club podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Joshua Kahn, alongside CM Alexander.
Hello, everyone.
And Benjamin Graham.
I'm so sorry.
Hey, Ben, are you okay? You okay, Ben?
Yeah, I've been feeling under the weather lately. I don't know what it is.
Okay.
Anyway,
cool.
What's up, Constant Readers? How's it going?
On this episode, we are going to be covering part 2 of The Stand. We're going to be covering chapters 27 to 44, and we have CM leading our discussion. CM, take it away.
Thanks, Josh. Before we dive in, quick recap of where we are in the book so far. Last episode, not much happened. Millions of people died, and we met most of our main characters.
Yep, good summary.
So obviously, a lot happened. This book takes off right from the first chapter. We meet our main characters. They watch people they love and care about die while they seem unaffected. The general population is starting to figure out what's going on. There's mayhem, chaos, and there's nothing anyone can really do about it. And, of course, we met the Walking Man. So we kick off part 2 back with our nice guy, Larry Underwood, and he's sitting on a bench in Central Park. His mom is dead, most of New York is dead, and he's reflecting on some choices that he's made in his life. Ben, you mentioned last episode you liked Larry, and I was like, oh, I hate Larry. I'm starting to come around. I think I was confusing him with Harold. It's been a long time.
Meet later. That's interesting you should say that. I had the exact opposite reaction. It's been a while since I've read this book. This is the 4th time I think I mentioned I've read this book. And, okay, I know his arc brings him around, makes him a really good guy. That doesn't happen yet. But this chapter isn't really about that. This chapter is just about the world being over.
The chaos that has been left. Like New York, there's so many people, so there's more than just like one survivor in this town. There's the guy they call the Monster Shouter, who just is exactly as his name implies, shouting about monsters. There's the guy he met that decided he's going to break into Yankee Stadium, run the bases naked, and jerk off on home plate because dreams come true.
Living his best life.
And then there's an old woman on a bench.
Right, so that... Did you call her an old lady?
Yeah.
Okay, so this...
Is she not?
This is interesting.
What, in her 50s or 60s?
I think so. She's older.
Yes.
But it's interesting that you say that because her name is Rita Blakemore. Larry meets her. I had 2 thoughts about this whole relationship, and I'm curious what you guys thought. So my first was that Larry is drawn to Rita because he perceives a kind of like take charge, maternal, motherly strength in her, essentially someone that he can use. And the second is that she is there on that park bench to die.
I did have that feeling because he meets her. She's just in the middle of the city, which is literally post-apocalyptic. It's empty. 5th Avenue burned down. It's just a mess. And she's sitting on a bench. And he talks with her, and when she opens up her purse, it's full of pills and a gun. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, she's gonna kill herself.
And she said, when I heard you approaching, I almost hid. But then she didn't, sort of like, well, if it's crazy person, maybe that's it.
And on your first point, yes, their relationship is crazy Oedipal.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
And he sees her first as this, going back to what you said, Josh, as this strong character, this kind of beautiful, well put together woman. And then a few chapters later, which we'll get to, it's like, oh, I realized Rita's old and annoying.
I forgot she was old.
Yeah.
Well, he specifically says it's not like he is confused that she's old. It says that she's trying to look younger and not so wealthy.
But there's like this strength in her that he initially sees that, and I think maybe it was just her trying desperately to hold on to that, and then
Well, she's got a sassy
can't maintain
spirit.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Rita's a really fascinating character.
Yeah.
She has so many layers that just really, really tragically get whittled down throughout this part of the book.
So moving on. I'm kidding. Actually, we will come back to Rita to talk about her more. But for now, we are checking in on Franny. Both of her parents are dead. Her mom in the hospital.
It's a terrible point to laugh, but I did just look down at my notes and see that I called her Frankie. So
I like that name much better. So her dad is dead as well, and he is upstairs in his bed. She's eating strawberry pie, she's making French fries, and she almost burns down her house.
She's got pregnancy brain and grief brain at the same time.
well, I can't blame her. She did watch that terrifying newscast from last episode.
Yeah, that she thought was a game show.
Yeah, she talks about that she's been in such a fog that she sat down and watched a bunch of guys executing people on live TV and was like, huh, that's weird.
She thought it was a Running Man.
Yeah.
She comes to this realization that, okay, I'm burning down my house, and I cannot leave my rotting father upstairs. It's summer. I'm going to have to bury him. I think she picks a really awesome spot to do it in the garden where we first meet him. And she is outside working her butt off, digging the grave. And here comes Harold Lauder.
Harold, who is the only person left alive in this town besides her.
Her old best friend's little brother.
And he is 16? Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah. And gross.
This irritated me because he's eye raping her, and she's uncomfortable, and she considers changing because she's just in her backyard shoveling, wearing whatever.
Right.
But then she thinks, oh no, I can't change because he'll know why, and that'll make him feel bad. No, it's okay for him to feel shame in that moment. Maybe that would make him grow as a person a little bit.
Okay, I have a confession. First and foremost, Harold sucks, obviously. But when I first read this book, I was a 13-year-old boy with very few friends, a weight problem, and I was angry all the time. The first time I read this book, I got Harold Lauder.
Mm-hmm.
And reading it now, oof, it's not a good feeling. Because even now I'm like, oh God, yeah, he's this super unpopular guy. He's, like Josh said, gross. He just has no hygiene. She says he's like oily and just
he's
really
smart.
And he
unpleasant.
leers.
And he's smart in a way that does not help him.
Oh yeah,
He talks like an asshole.
yeah.
He is just a typical. He's the prototypical neckbeard.
Yeah.
Like, there's an alternate world where that's just me, guys. And I feel,
Oh, Ben.
I know, I'm not happy about
Ben,
it.
Is Harold your Annie?
Oh shit! Oh no! Oh no, guys! Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! Yes, it is. Because he's a fucking pile of garbage. But as a character, I kind of love him because he's so easy to hate. And as we get to know him throughout the book, he changes in several ways, but doesn't change in a lot of other ways. I'm not happy about this, but in the interest of full disclosure, I had to tell you.
I'm so happy you did. But that also is a credit to King writing real characters. Like, even though I was not a Harold Lauder, I had an envisioning of somebody that I knew growing up that I was like,
yeah. Because you used to know me. And you're like, whoa, how do I know that? Why is this guy so familiar?
I know this guy. But just like especially like, it's the immaturity. The immaturity is the one thing that informs all of the things that we hate about Harold, all stem from the fact that he is a 16-year-old who is no guidance, and it all springs from that.
See, now I can't read the note that I wrote about Harold.
Oh, please do.
Please do
Please
it.
do.
It's poor dumb penis can't help it. Boo.
That is the most succinct summing up of that entire personality type. And I love it. That's hysterical.
I just want to touch on one more thing in this chapter. And we might not hit on all of these, but throughout, the characters are all having nightmares. And I think we talked a little bit about that. But Franny's nightmare was rough.
Yeah. It's all of the nightmares with the dark man, the walking dude, are all pretty fucking scary. But hers is so
much more personal somehow than the others, I feel like, so far at least. Her nightmare is her dad is laying under a sheet on the kitchen table, and she's approaching the sheet, and then she knows that it's not her dad, but she can't help but pull it back, and it's the dark man. And she just feels this wave of like dread and cold come over her, and he has something for her, and it's a twisted coat hanger. Well, something for her baby, I guess.
Yeah. So disturbing.
We check in on Stu for a lighter note, and he's
Yep. This is where the book really lightens up is when
Yeah.
we get to Stu's chapter.
he's waiting for a man named Elder, a man he's sure has been given his final order. He's coming to kill him.
I loved this moment so much because Stu knows this man's going to come in and he's going to kill me. This is what's going to happen. Stu, Elder walks in and he's visibly sick, and he's very casually being like, you know what? Well, I finally got my orders on what to do with you. And he's like talking around it. And Stu's plan is to go, look at that goddamn rat behind you. And when Elder turns, there's a moment where he's like, oh, fuck, that actually worked. And grabs a chair and bashes him with a chair. And it's glorious.
And this guy has that bad guy, like horror movie, Jason, Michael Myers moment where he comes back. Like
The
you
shard
think
of
he's
plastic
dead.
through his eye.
Oh, yeah. And
So cool.
Stu like hears something behind him, and you think that it's going to be sort of a hallucination, or just he's so stressed out that he thinks it's him, and he turns around and nothing's there. No, it's him. Elder got back up. He's coming after him.
And Stu grabs the gun that had fallen out of Elder's baggie, his gun baggie, and grabs a gun and shoots him in the goddamn chest, which I thought was interesting that our ultimate good guy, our arguably main character, is the first person in the book about good versus evil with a body count.
Ooh. That is interesting.
Yeah. Granted, it was completely self-defense.
Very true.
And yeah. But I just thought that was interesting.
Well, and there's that moment right afterwards where he's like, I sure hope he was going to kill me and not let me out. And then he walks outside and he sees all of Stu's files and clothes and everything. And he's like, these were about to get burned with my body. We're good. They weren't going to let me out.
Or returned to him after he signed some paperwork.
Uh-oh.
Do you guys want to talk about him just getting out of that facility? Because there's some creepy moments in there before he finally gets out the doors.
And it returns later on in these
in the dream.
recurring nightmares that he has. The sequence of him just trying not to sprint through this empty hospital and seeing doors open with just bodies piled in them is so stressful. It's almost like a nightmare in and of itself.
Oh, yeah.
And the worst part is when he finally finds the door. He finally finds an exit after like being on the edge of a panic attack. He finds this exit door and stands there. And just as he's about to open it, the stairwell that he's standing next to, a hand reaches out and grabs his ankle. It basically says like, hey, come on down here.
Yeah.
And it's such a Pennywise moment
Yeah.
that I was like, is this supernatural or not? No, it's just a guy because he stomps on his hand and he falls down some stairs. But it really freaked me out.
We get a brief visit, a return to Arnett, which kind of took me back to Salem's Lot a little bit.
Yes.
Oh, this town is also a character. And it's just like a paragraph telling us, yeah, Arnett, where we started off, it is now a ghost town.
It's empty and gone.
Half burned down.
Then we meet a new character, although he's not going to be around for very long. Christopher Bradenton.
Kit.
Kit dies a rough death.
This chapter is weird.
It is weird. I wish that I could just read the whole chapter on her podcast. That would be ridiculous, but it's like I was trying to figure out, how do you sum up? It's so bizarre. Like I don't even know how to describe how he's acting.
What it is Christopher Bradenton is dying. He is just like all of these characters we've seen from the outside, dying of Captain Trips. And he's in bed and he's delirious with fever. And the way King writes it is, we've seen these characters ranting and kind of losing their mind and their space and time of where they are and when they are.
But we've never felt like we were losing ours
But
with them.
Exactly. We've never felt, we've never seen it from inside that. And that's what he writes. Mm-hmm. And it's awesome. It's such a fascinating bit of writing because it doesn't flow together.
Oh,
it's
not at
just a freewheeling madness that is really hard to follow.
Well, especially when his brain is trying to focus on, I hear someone in my house, and he like talks about hearing footsteps downstairs, and then his brain goes off about when he was in Chicago for another couple lines, and then he hears a sound and it brings him back to where he is now, and it's like he's trying to hold on to where he is, but his brain is so far gone, there's no hope.
Basically, Flagg was using him to get a car and papers and everything. So we have this exchange where he is trying to pull this information out of this guy who is dying and doing it in a very cruel way. Like, he holds his nose shut so he can't breathe. He sits on his chest. But the whole time he's doing these things, it reminds me of Sam Raimi, that sort of Three Stooges horror. The way that he acts in this chapter.
So like this was an Evil Dead scene from Evil Dead to you?
A little bit.
Yeah. I can see that.
It was so much more menacing. I mean, he has that. He's always described as like very jovial, and he has the big grin. He's the grinning man or whatever. But it was still fucking terrifying.
And see, this whole thing felt very Joker-ish to me. Like that's the attitude. Like, because he throws like a bucket of cold water on him and watches him convulse, which is like making him even more sick. And he's just like.
Then he goes to pick up his car. He walks to the gas station. Okay, maybe you guys can help me out with this. He's walking around and he turns and this guy has died, Kit. Yes. And Kit is standing there and he steps on something and it punctures his foot, but there's no blood. So it's like telling us, yeah, he is dead, but he's there because he is a minion. I don't know. I don't like the word minion, but part of Flagg. And he snaps his fingers and he disappears. So where did he go? Is he really dead now? Did he put him somewhere for later use? Like,
that was my question too, because he also says that if he finds there's jewels on the ground and he snaps and they disappear.
He doesn't find jewels. He kicks over a tire and there are jewels under them, like he's in a beat 'em up video game. Like, he could have kicked over a box and found a whole turkey that he could use to regain his health. It's just, I think it's just a manifestation of his weird chaos magic.
Yeah. Like, he's getting his magic and just things are happening and he's like,
he's like, I don't need to worry about this.
We're back with Lloyd, who is trapped in his prison cell and was somehow smart enough to save some food, but not enough food. And he's starving and he's kind of looking at his cellmate's leg. His cellmate's dead. Like, that's going to happen later.
Oh, we skipped over Lloyd so much last episode because he's a dink and like his one chapter last episode was really annoying.
I like to think that we kind of pan out and we realize, he's to this point. He's like, I might have to eat my cellmate. And it's been like a day and a half.
I love these chapters. These are some of the like most unnerving chapters to me.
Oh, for sure.
Because it never says in this chapter he looks at his cellmate's leg.
Right.
It never comes out and says he starts to think about cannibalism.
It also never says that he takes a bite.
Exactly. That's such a cool, where it's such a terrible thing. It is such an unbelievably monstrous thing that even he can't think about what he's done.
And that comes up later, but let's just talk about it now because we're just with Randall Flagg and we're with Larry. Let's just hit it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Throughout these 2 chapters, he's first stuck in his cell, and it's been
day and a half.
A few days, and he has his food supply is waning, and he has been trying to get the cot leg off of his bed so much that his fingers are bloody.
Yeah, it's gross.
Which is funny because he gets it off, and then he's like, "What? Why'd I do this?" Because he's still kind of a dink. But he kills a rat and then puts it under his bunk, and he's like, I'm not gonna. He separates it from his food stash. It's not in his food stash.
Well, and just real briefly, what was interesting about him taking the thing off and his fingers are bleeding, he was sort of reliving this experience he had as a kid where he had a pet rabbit and forgot that he had a pet rabbit. And then he remembered like a week later, and that rabbit had like gnawed its own paws.
The parallels between him and the rabbit are really upsetting.
Lloyd is an asshole who refuses to take responsibility for his actions.
Yes, he
Plain
keeps
and
saying,
simple. Like
it's Poke's fault I'm in here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He killed those people, except for the ones that I killed.
Yeah, but I wouldn't have killed those people if Poke hadn't been with me. It's his influence.
But in his second chapter, since we're lumping them both together, it's a week later. He's almost out of food, and it just says that his cell, the guy in the cell across from him, is dragged up against the cell, and there are bite marks, and he's like, huh.
Yeah, he never, well, because I think he was relieved that he never had to take a bite.
Yeah.
But then it tells us, the reader, the book tells us that there are bite marks.
Yeah. But he's on the edge of insanity, and he's ranting about the key, the people that make the keys, the keepers of the keys. They're the good people, the people that follow the law, and it's their fault. And just as he's about to lose his mind, he hears a voice. The
note that I made, because I'm a dummy, was like, there's a voice in the jail. There's someone there. And then my next note is, it's Flagg. Fucking of course it's Flagg. Who else would it be?
I thought it was cool, though, that his instinct was right, which was to not respond to that voice. But he had no choice, because it's respond to that voice or starve to death.
But yeah, that is like, even as far gone and close to starving he is, that he is so terrified of Flagg. But he does call out, and Flagg comes to him and hands him a stone that is also a key.
That I thought was super cool. Just this black stone with a red flaw, and he's just twirling it in his fingers. And as he's twirling it, it becomes a key. Then it goes back to the stone, then back to the key.
A flaw that looks like a red or possibly crimson eye.
Oh, I wonder what that could be related to.
But he essentially says, I will let you out, Lloyd. We'll go get a big lunch. But first, you have to kneel to me, and you will be the first. And so Lloyd becomes the first, and Flagg's right-hand man.
His number one.
I know this book gears up towards a battle between good and evil. Like, that's pretty much from the get-go, that's where we're going. And I just kind of assumed Lloyd was going to be another cog in the machine. He's a piece on the board for the bad guys, and that was it. And then here, when he's like, he's making him his right-hand man, and he has chosen him, my first thought was, well, that is an interesting choice.
And I think it's because he is so easily corrupted.
Yeah, he's just easily manipulated. He has no fear of controlling him.
All right, so we catch up with Nick just as the power in the jailhouse finally goes out. And this scene is great. And by great, I mean terrible and terrifying, because it reminds you of not only how hard it would be to just be yourself and be in this situation where it's just you and you're alone, but to not be able to hear and not be able to speak. That would be horrible. So it's horrible for him, because little does he know, Ray Booth has been keeping his eye on things, and he sees his moment and he comes in to attack Nick. And I definitely wanted to scream, "Look behind you!" at the book.
Yeah, he couldn't have heard you.
No.
For two reasons.
Huh, what's the other one?
He's deaf and fictional.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
I love this moment because he attacks him from behind, and Nick's first thought is, it's a monster. Because of just how unrealistic everything has been.
He's not wrong.
No, that's very true.
Also true.
And the fight is like really intense because like Ray he's got the tube neck and he's on death's door as it is. Nick accidentally shoots a bullet not into his leg, but he grazes down his whole thigh because he's trying to pull his gun out. Ray does something that made me sick to my stomach and I did not think was going to happen. He tries to gouge out Nick's eyes.
Smartest move anyone in a book has ever made. Always go for the eyes. Someone's
Yeah,
attacking
that's
you, just stick your thumbs in their eyeballs. They'll stop.
Oh, yeah.
I
That's a good
assume
point.
I've never done that.
I was so afraid that scene was going to end with his eyes popping.
Oh,
Like I genuinely thought
Fuck.
that he was going to be deaf, mute, and blind.
and later he thinks,
But
if
I'm
that
half
was
right.
the case, I would not.
No,
I would
who
not
could
choose to live
blame
through
him?
that.
No,
I know.
no way.
In an empty world where you know that that there could be someone to attack you at any time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, fuck no.
But luckily he's only half blind because now he's got one dead eye.
God, poor Nick. Nick does not deserve any of
Seriously.
this shit. Okay, so now we're back with Lloyd again. Oh wait, I'm sorry. It's the trash can man.
So
Get these confused.
Yeah, Ben, you mentioned you like this guy, so take it away.
I love the Trash Can Man. He is one of my favorite King villains of all time. He's almost not a villain. He's
You don't get two. You can't have Harold and Trash Can.
he's a homeless man.
A homeless
they-
pyromaniac.
Yes, who is extremely mentally disturbed, has had this horrible, tragic background, but he also loves to burn things. He's called the Trash Can Man because as a kid, he would set trash cans on fire and burn up Miss Semple's pension check. And he hears voices and he's wandering around his hometown, which is empty. And he keeps looking out into the distance and seeing the local oil refinery and having this itch in the back of his head saying, I bet that would look really cool if it were on fire. So he makes it on fire.
Yeah, it does.
I think that was the perfect summary.
It's so good. And the way it's written where it's like bouncing back and forth and he loses time and he's like, oh, nope, I'm going to be a good guy. I'm not going to burn that down. And then there's a paragraph break and he's like, so he's halfway there. Like, oh shit. And then after he blows up this entire oil refinery and it's this hellstorm and he looks off into the distance and goes, Chicago's that way. I bet there's a lot of places that would look pretty cool if they were on fire right now. And he wanders off. It's all we get in this part of the book. The Trash Can Man is fascinating to me. I'm very excited to get more.
After finishing this chapter, I was sad that we didn't have another chapter about the Trash Can Man in our reading yet. I'm so excited because it's such a chaotic character because there's no like malicious intention.
No,
really.
He's a wild card.
Yeah, he's just going for it.
This song is about good versus evil, and also the Trash Can Man's there, and I love it. And
The
Sam,
three
you look
sides to this
baffled.
I can barely tolerate this section.
Really?
I don't know what it is about him. I don't like him. I don't want to read about him.
That's
Maybe it's
great.
because I don't like chaos.
No, that's fair.
I love chaos, so this is right up my alley.
All right, let's go back to Rita and Larry, because Larry is struggling to be a nice guy. And I imagine that his failing is pretty obvious even to Rita, which I think we find is taking quite a toll on her physically, mentally, and just their relationship as a whole. Because they're in her apartment, and he's like barely tolerating her moment to moment, but trying so hard to tolerate her. And you know when people are like that, like you can still tell, when someone hates you.
Oh yeah. No, this is the part where I was like, oh, was I wrong about Larry? Because
this part's rough.
Such an asshole. Because Rita's losing it. The whole city smells like death. All of the people in there, the millions of people rotting in these hot New York tenements, and it sounds not great. And they found the monster shouter murdered, stabbed to death hundreds of times, and she's just her grasp is slipping, and Larry's not fucking having it.
No, and
I feel really bad about the note I made now, because I guess I didn't.
Penis sad, can't help it.
Kind of. The note that I made is, wow, Rita's super attached to him now that they're lovers in the nighttime.
Jeez, man.
You really have a way with words sometimes, Josh. Now that they're lovers in the night
Now that
times.
they're lovers in the nighttime, because they spent
Larry and Rita, they're lovers. Lovers in the night times. You fucking creep. What the hell?
Come on, my brain pieces this together as last time we met them, they were just going to have lunch. Mm-hmm. And then now he's at her apartment. So my brain just was like, oh, now they had lunch, went back and had sex, and now he is her husband. Because some of the reactions, I wasn't reading them, because also as she's these first few reactions we get of her attachment to him and her kind of being all up in his business is before we find out it smells like super death out, and they saw a dead body stabbed to death the other day, and she reacts. The way she reacts to him translated to me she is treating him like she would have treated her husband on every day-to-day. In her brain, he is just that place now.
She seems like a woman who has never been treated respectfully by a man.
Yes.
And every move she makes is in reference to how he is going to respond. Am I going to upset him? Is he going to yell at me?
Right.
And it's really sad. And we're seeing her do this through his eyes, which makes it even sadder because he can't stand her now. When we first met her, also through Larry's eyes, she was this older but vibrant, strong woman, this mother figure. And now she is weak and useless to him. And you can tell he's not consciously, but like his mom said, you use people.
Mm-hmm. He decides to use this as an excuse to treat her the way as though he were an abusive boyfriend, because they decide to leave town. They decide to get out of the city, and they pack up a bunch of stuff and they start going. They decide to take the Lincoln Tunnel for some stupid fucking reason.
Nightmare City.
Of
man.
all the ways to get out of the city, let's go through a long ass pitch black
They did it
tunnel.
for me because I loved this scene.
It's a great bit. But they get packed and they start walking, and they've walked several blocks. Mm-hmm. And he turns and looks, and he notices she's wearing sandals and her feet are bleeding and she's in pain. And he fucking screams at her. How could you be so fucking stupid? How could you not come prepared?
She's a rich lady. She never walked 4 blocks in her life.
And it's such a shitty thing, and he's such an asshole, and he realizes in the moment, oh, I'm being a huge asshole. That's not an excuse. But the worst part is she is like, fine, go on, fuck off, I'm not going with you anymore. And he storms off and he gets to the tunnel and it's pitch black and all the lights are off and he goes, oh, I didn't bring a flashlight. You fucking hypocrite.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, it made me so mad.
That's almost word for word the note that I had down when he mentions his flashlight.
Yeah.
Like, you want to harp on her for not wearing the right shoes. You're an idiot too.
Yeah, this part was rough.
Yeah, so he is in the tunnel and there are cars and people and everyone's dead and he can't see and he's making his way through and he's comes to a point where he has to walk on top of dead bodies and he gets really spooked and he hears something and he starts firing. It's Rita.
Spoiler alert. Holy shit. It's the person you were with.
She changes her mind and because she's clinging to life, which is him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they end up getting back together and they leave New York. And we're going to come back to them, sadly. But for right now, check in on Franny. She's taking care of Gus, who is the guy who operates the pier. He dies, and I guess now she decides that Harold is probably the last man on Earth, so she can talk to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been several days at this point,
Yeah.
right? And she says that like, he was respectful at least, because when he came over while she was burying her dad, she was like, hey, leave me the hell alone. And he did.
Yeah. But he's been driving around kind of like, just checking on her, but not bothering her, which is fine. So yeah, they decide to leave. They're going to make their way to the research lab, not knowing what Stu knows, obviously. But not before he paints Harold Loves Franny on the side of a barn so people can find them.
That's only half true.
Yeah.
He gets the idea to paint their directions up on the roof of this barn. Hey, we're alive, and we're going to this plague center. What did you think, Josh, when Harold's idea is there's this plague center in Stovington, a place that we have been in this book? What did you expect out of this?
Well, that was that moment where I was like, when he brought up that place, another instance, like, I started to like Harold a little bit. I was like, good on you for like being proactive and piecing together. Yeah, I guess this would be the place to go to. But I was like, that's not gonna end well because I know what's there.
Yeah.
But I couldn't fault it. I was like, that's a damn good plan instead of staying in this fucking town. And then like the lengths he goes to that giant message, the whole route, and then signs both of their full names, and he had to like hang out the window to paint her name on it. And
that was an act of love. That's why I phrased that that way.
Yeah. Well, I thought you were talking about later we find out he did carve a little heart with their initials in it on the inside.
Because I guess we have to remember he is a 16-year-old boy.
Yes.
We can make some allowances.
But I like the moment that she's like, why did you risk doing that just for my name? Like, why did you? And he's like, because we're in this together. And that was like such an honest response of like, because we're a team now. Mm-hmm. I'm like, yeah, all right, good on you, man.
His dream has just come true.
Yeah.
Okay, this next one coming up, it's chapter 37. My favorite so far of the book. We're back with Stu, and he meets a dog, Kojak. And then he meets the man with the dog, who is not the dog's owner, Glenn Bateman. And they have beers and sandwiches, and they become friends right away. And it's like they are in a different book for this chapter, and it's amazing. And I just we need to talk about Glenn's hypothesis on now what is going to likely happen, as society rebuilds itself and you get these pockets of communities with different people who have different skills and different resources. Because I was just eating this chapter up.
Yes. First of all, I could not agree more that this feels like a different book. I love the idea of a post-apocalyptic book that is this idyllic and relaxing.
Yes.
It is. So that's one thing throughout this book. Everyone, almost the first thing they do when they decide to travel is we got to get guns. But then no one cares about them or uses them. Because when Stu, who has a gun on him, hears and sees Glenn, he's just like, oh, hey, And Glenn's like, oh, hope you're not going to use that gun. He's like, nah, that's it. It's so much more optimistic than any other, like all the grim, dark Walking Dead bullshit where everyone's holding guns on they're just like, oh, another person. I haven't seen one of them in a while.
Let's talk about Glenn's theory.
His Society A versus Society B.
Glenn's sociology lecture. I love Glenn, and I can tell exactly why. We've already met him in another book with a different name.
Okay.
In the dark half.
He's the professor.
He is... I can't remember anyone's names ever.
Professor
Lord
Trelawney.
Help me. Yes, Professor Trelawney from the dark half.
Yeah.
His professor friend who's just like kooky and really smart, but in a really laid back way. Just the kind of community college professor you just want to hang out in their office. Is that just me? Am I the only one that had that experience?
No, I had that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
But that's funny because there's also, like, this is kind of the third time that this book has reminded me of the dark half.
What were the other 2 times?
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's kind of a loose one, but it's the first one is the eye gouging, like the eye imagery. Anytime I think eye imagery, I always think the dark half.
True.
And the other time is, I believe it's Stu. It's somebody's dream about the dark man, and he never sees the dark man, but he feels the dark man behind him, and he knows that if he were to turn, the dark man would be there, but he doesn't want to turn. And that was Thad's dream with George Stark.
I can feel that.
So there's this part I loved. I don't know why this stuck out to me. It's the most memorable line in the book that I won't be able to remember. But they're having this conversation about how, you'll have this community here and this nearby community, and one is in a better location, and they have a guy who knows how to work things and he can get the power back on. So this other community's like, hey, send us your guy. And he's like, well, what do you do? And Stu's like, you send him. And he's like, no, you don't send him. What if they kidnap him? What if they keep him? He's useful. He's valuable. So then just sort of pointing out, like, how are these communities going to relate to one another? And then the people that don't have those resources, somebody who rolls in, who can take charge, may not be a good leader, may not even be a good person. They're going to flock to that person because, okay, he's got it. I don't have to worry about it. Out of my hands. But as they're having this conversation, Glenn is painting, and Stu just kind of notices, and the way he notices it is hilarious because he's like, he made the unfortunate decision to incorporate the dog into the painting because he cannot paint to save his life.
Yes.
But he paints with the knowledge that he is painting the best landscapes in the country right now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that is such a great little character bit for all 3 of them. Like, they're having this very weighty discussion that is basically King being like, here's my thesis paper for this book, which is still fascinating and really cool. And like, I could honestly, if I were there, probably listen to Glenn talk all
Forever.
day. But yeah, just that little character moment. I did laugh out loud at that as well. Where it's just like, oh, he shouldn't have done that. That dog's not going to hold still.
And then before we move on to arguably the next best, most awesome chapter, Glenn also makes a point about who's surviving, animals and people alike. And they have a conversation that and I'm sure anyone reading this could not help but think about Franny and her baby the whole time.
Yeah.
Because they're talking, is mothers who are immune, are their babies immune? Do they die in utero? Are they stillborn? Like, in some cases a mother can pass on that immunity. And I just thought, I know it happens because I've read this before, and when I read it the first time as a kid, so I probably didn't think this deeply, but if I didn't know any better, I'd be like, oh my God, is Franny going to go through all of this? And then she gives birth to a dead baby. So moving on to chapter 38.
On that lighthearted note.
Okay, I know you guys are really into this chapter. Go wild.
This chapter is about the second epidemic to strike the world because the superflu has killed off everyone that it could. So now this is a chapter about I refer to it as the Darwin Awards for the rest of the world because it is people who are in a position that maybe can't take care of themselves or do not take care of themselves the right way, and there's no one there to save them.
The book calls it the second epidemic. and points out that it is what Glenn Bateman would call the good old hospital, or the good old emergency room blues, which is a just super king phrase that I love.
So through this, we jump to several different characters, and we find out how these people who are dead now by either a certain circumstance or their own doing. Ben, what's your favorite? What's your favorite one?
Oh, there are so many.
Is it the refrigerator mother?
Judy Horton. That is my favorite one.
Really?
Yes. Because what a bitch.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't pick. I just love the style. This is the sequel to one of my favorite chapters from last episode, where it was just the vignettes of the flu progressing. This is vignettes of all across the country, the unfortunate few. It might be the little kid because of how goddamn tragic
and it's the very first one they talk about.
First one.
Got it.
It's a little kid somewhere in the country. He's 5 years old, and he's alone. He watched his family die one by one, and then dies when he falls down a well, and just that's it.
He falls down a well, breaks both of his legs, and dies 20 hours later.
It's horrible.
Horrifying.
That's what this... It's a really weird way to say how much I love this chapter. But it's so dark, and it's so, like, scary, because you don't... I hadn't thought of this up to this point, where it illustrates all these people have survived, but they are not safe.
No, yeah.
Anything could happen at any time. Something, even a minor thing that they say, a guy could have tonsillitis and be dying and just die because there are no doctors. It's fascinating.
So I'll touch more on mine that Sam talked about. Judy Horton, she got knocked up by a guy she slept with who was in college. Her parents made them get married, so she resents him. She resents her baby, and she hates her life, and she's real bitter about it. Then when her child dies, she's like, huh, good. And when her husband dies, she's like, ha, great. But she doesn't know what to do with him, so she takes him to this, like, freezer in the basement of their apartment complex, and then proceeds to visit them every day and just look at them. And one day she forgets to put the stopper in, and the freezer door closes, and that's the moment she realizes there is no handle on the inside. So she will die with her husband and baby.
Very fitting ending for her.
It's like
an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yeah, I was trying to think of what it was, but that's what it is. It's more like Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah, Tales from the Crypt.
Because it's way darker.
So there are two more chapters that I think we should just talk about together. It's with Nick. He's fighting this infection. He's dreaming of Mother Abigail, and he decides that he needs to leave this town. He gets on his bike. He heads out, and he meets this guy, Tom Cullen. And I love this chapter because I love Tom. Tom is a cool, awesome dude. Let's talk about our friend Tom Cullen.
I don't know how to feel about Tom Cullen. I love him. He is a great character. He's one of the most memorable characters in the entire book. If you talk about The Stand with someone is bound to say M-O-O-N.
Spells I love Tom Cullen.
Spells I love Tom Cullen. But that's also kind of the problem, is he's a cartoon character.
Yeah, so Tom Cullen is what we call differently abled.
Yes.
His brain does not work.
That's not what the book calls him.
No, the book calls him retarded. It's not a word we continue to use. But it's 2019, he's differently abled. And he can, like, it's so interesting because he has these moments where he's making these connections. But outwardly, he just, like, shuts down. And people don't realize, like, he's working to make these connections and piece things together and get it. And Nick has, his first meeting with him, he's like, I'm just passing through here. And he thinks that he's going to leave this guy behind until he realizes how kind of helpless and childlike Tom is and that they need to stick together.
Well, the first thing they point out is when Nick writes him a message, he finds out that Tom can't read. And I laughed out loud at the thought of, like, this is before they get into, like, about Tom, but it's like he hands him the thing and he's like, oh, I can't read. Like that is perfect.
That is a great like setup for this, just story wise. The fascination of someone who can't, the two people alone in a world and they cannot communicate in pretty much any way.
But those two people are going to be the strongest two people because of all the little barriers that they have to overcome. It's going to be awesome.
And their relationship is just so sweet.
It's so endearing.
It's so instantly, Nick instantly cares for him. And it is just fantastic.
I love my favorite moment. The moment I knew I was going to love Tom was when we get that first glimpse of how he shuts down and he's making the connections in his head when he finally pieces together that Nick is deaf. And you see that internal, like this long road that it goes, and he is so excited that he knows. And I was like, I love this.
Well, and Nick is
so excited.
The line Nick says, Nick like smiles to himself and he's like, man, I don't remember the last time my disability brought someone so much joy. And that's such a great little moment of like, Nick's just like, good for him.
And Nick falls asleep outside while Tom is talking and just telling him about his life. He's catching snippets of it. And he wakes up and he's really hot. Tom had covered him, put a blanket on him.
I love it so much.
3 blankets.
2 blankets and a quilt.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it, despite it being the middle of the day in the summer.
Yeah. I have some... it hasn't aged super well, but yeah, Tom Cullen is such an endearing character, and his relationship with Nick is so sweet and caring that it's ultimately like it's really nice, and you really, really just want both of them to pull through.
And they go on a bit of an adventure before we leave them. We'll pick back up with them in our next episode, but just sort of to mention, a tornado almost wipes him out. Would have wiped Nick out if Tom hadn't been there, because Nick, can't hear it or see it. It was behind them, so they take shelter in a barn. And Man in Black, in some form, is in that barn with them, and it's just a spooky, cool moment.
It's Nick saying like he could feel the presence, and then when the storm passes, Tom Cullen says there was someone in there. He came out of the tornado.
Yep. And then, just real briefly, because I don't think we need to talk about her very much.
They meet another tornado in the form of a young girl named Julie Lowry.
Yes, who is crazy. Of course, Nick bangs her. And then he's like, oh, that was a bad idea. See ya. And, well, she has it coming, though. I shouldn't.
Yeah, she's very mean.
She's mean to Tom. And so he drives her away, but not before she shoots at them and, like, scatters all their stuff, slashes their tires. So they take off and they hook up with Ralph Bretner, and we're going to get more of this group together later. This is a really short piece, but I'll just mention it because it brings together some of our main characters.
This is the first meeting, if you don't count RF and Lloyd.
Stu, Harold, and Franny connect. And of course, Harold is very intimidated or insecure about Stu immediately, and Stu has this very frank conversation with him like, you love her, obviously. Are you sleeping with her? I'm not here to put my hand in your cookie jar,
which is not great.
We're better together than separate. And he gives in, and so they take off together. And of course, at the end of that chapter, which is also the end of book 1, Stu realizes, yeah, I do want her. Harold does not stand a chance.
No, not in the least.
So we're going to finish things out with Larry and Rita and 2 more characters. And this is when my feelings about Larry started to change.
Yes.
Larry and Rita are now in the country. They're in Vermont, I believe, at this point. And Larry gets up, and it's the 4th of July. He's standing outside naked, singing "Oh Say Can You See." Refers to his penis as Old Sparky, but we don't have to dwell on that.
Let's move on.
But he's like, I feel great. This is what the world is now. I'm going to go inside and have sex with my lady. And he goes in, and the tent smells weird. And he like touches her, and she doesn't move. And he rolls her over, and she has green vomit, and she is holding her bottle of pills, and she has taken her own life in the night.
Interesting. Did she?
Because it doesn't say specifically whether she accidentally overdosed or she intentionally overdosed.
I 100% think she intentionally overdosed.
Really?
Yeah.
I assumed it was an accident because as it's gone on, she's been kind of on the edge, and he's kind of mentioned that she has all these pills, and he's kind of worried about it, but that's her deal. It's not his place to say anything about it. Yeah, I definitely got the feeling that it was more of an accidental thing.
I think I'm kind of in between. Like, I think that it was an accident that she was very careless about not making. I think she was okay if something like that happened.
Yeah.
She more of I'm going to take all these. Maybe I'll feel better. Maybe I won't wake up. Either way, fine.
That's fair.
My thought was that she was still clutching the bottle. And that was like my thought of like she downed everything in it and held onto it as she went out.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
Yeah.
Well, either way, it's pretty tragic, and it fucks up Larry something terrible.
Yeah, he leaves her, does not give her a burial or anything. He just gets the F out.
I fucking hated that so much.
Yeah, that she deserved better than that for sure. So he's on his motorcycle, and he has a brush with death. He crashes and almost really hurts himself, and that's when he realizes Rita's no longer here. If I had hurt myself, who knows what could have happened? Like, I wouldn't have anybody here to help me or help me take care of it. And he comes to this sort of like, I think his first growing moment. Like, this is the very first one. His mom dying didn't do it. The thing he went through with Rita before didn't do it. I think this is where he's kind of like, oh.
There's no one to take from now. He's alone.
This part with the motorcycle is made better by that chapter earlier of all the accidental deaths. Because we see, he comes a hair's breadth from being in that chapter instead.
Yeah.
In fact, that chapter has a story about a little girl riding her bike and fractures her skull on her bicycle. And there's no one to help her.
So he ditches his bike in a pretty personal way.
Yeah, he rams it off a cliff and then stares at it until it dies so it doesn't get up and chase him, Christine style.
So Larry is now walking, and he's been walking a while. He's thin, he's dehydrated, he's sunburned, and he comes up on this very scenic looking house, and there's like a pond in front of it. And he gets a drink, and he takes a nap, resting against a tree in the shade. And there is a little boy and a woman in the bushes. Let's talk about them.
In the middle of the day, as he's passed out, exhausted because he's has heat stroke, he's delirious, and as he's passed out, a little boy in his underwear, holding a big serrated butcher's knife, comes out and just stands over him. And a woman says, nah, not now. Come on. It's so creepy.
I had a question. Did they say how old the kid is?
Isn't he like around 10?
I
9
think
or 10?
Oh, I think they said he could be 10 or 13.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because he's sort of feral, kind of. Like we find out he doesn't talk, and it's a little bit hard to tell how old he is. And he is with a woman. So she calls him Joe because she's not his mom. She just found him. Her name is Nadine, and she looks like Sindel from Mortal Kombat.
Yes! Oh, that's perfect.
She's wearing a purple onesie, a weird black bandit mask.
The two things that jumped out at me at this part, the one thing I just wanted to point out, that despite that the kid is older, for some reason, as I read this, I envision Joe as Gage.
Oh wow! I didn't do that.
I don't know why. Like,
it's a kid with a knife.
Yeah, it's a kid with a knife. But I forgot he was older, so in my brain, I knew he wasn't like a small child. But
must have been very strange when he started playing a full-grown guitar later.
It was, and then I was like, right, he's older than my brain keeps saying. But this is This might be my favorite moment in this entire section we've read, that when Larry wakes up, all this stuff happened, he had no idea. But when he wakes up, he's like stretching and he's like, I feel better. And that's the moment he's like, I could have been riding a bicycle this whole time. And I set my book down to laugh out loud because I loved it so much.
So then he does ride a bicycle. And following a safe yet close enough to keep tabs on him distance is this woman, Nadine, and this little boy, Joe. Because Joe is very attached to Nadine and the knife. But she realizes that they need to find someone else. They need to find people. Although we're starting to get the hints that maybe her path might be different. There is something calling to her. Something that's been calling to her whole life. We find out that she's been saving herself for this thing that's calling to her.
That
they refer to her as being
weird.
pure.
Yes.
Yeah. And I do love this. So they're following, but they're not like secret agents. They're not super stealthy. Larry at a point realizes somebody's following me. And I found it interesting that he is very at ease about being followed. And at first, he's like, well, if they wanted to hurt me, they would have hurt me by now, whatever. And that's why he's saying he's at ease. But I kind of disagree with that. I think maybe he's at ease because now he's not alone anymore. And his whole thing is about not being alone.
And I think he realizes, too, that they might be afraid of him and he could easily be that person afraid of someone but not wanting to be alone. You know, there are a few nights where they're following him. One of the nights, Nadine wakes up, Joe is gone, and he has walked to the screened-in porch where Larry is sleeping, holding the knife, like making stabbing motions, just watching it. Very, very creepy.
There's an episode of Aqua Teen Hunger Force with these dolls.
Yeah!
Kill!
Yes!
But then they never do anything. Yeah. That's the feeling I got from this. Kill?
Well, until the next day, when Larry's looking at the ocean, he's like, I made it. And then he turns around and Joe is charging him and swings at him. But Larry, because he's bigger and faster, gives him the old "This is Sparta" kick to the torso and sends him flying across the ground.
But he's not trying to hurt him. He's just like, I can't let this kid stab me.
That is such a funny bit because, like, when at first he says he turns around and he hears this screaming that at first he's like, oh, it must be a gull or something. But then it's this almost naked little kid with a knife. And for a split second, it's really creepy. But then he's like, but he's a fucking little kid, so I kicked him and he fell down. It's like, oh, yeah, I forgot. Kids are small and stupid.
Larry starts to get to know Nadine and Joe and soothes the wild beast with a guitar. And we find that Joe might be a genius or autistic. I don't know.
He's a mimic.
Yeah, he picks up the guitar.
Yours is better.
He's a mimic. And he can just play everything you just heard. And he'd never played before, so he can't play it well, but he picks it up very quickly. He hits all the notes. And he starts to warm up to Larry a little bit.
And he ditches the knife. Larry throws the knife into the ocean.
Good move, Larry.
And Joe kind of takes the guitar as his new safety blanket.
Although Larry does know he could still bludgeon me with a guitar.
Yeah.
They agree that they are going to travel together. And Larry kind of starts to like Nadine, because of course. And then they meet a woman who we don't get very much of, but Lucy Swan. And this is when they realize that they are all having the same dreams.
That's later. We skipped over where Nadine, Joe, and Larry come to Ogonquit and find a barn with a sign painted on it. They find Franny and Harold's barn and see the sign. Their first sign that there are other people with clear directions.
My favorite thing about this is that as they piece together everything Harold did, the mental image of Harold that Larry concocts is hilariously wrong.
I feel so bad about that.
But they do the same thing. They get motorcycles. They meet Lucy, and they reach the plague center that now has a new set of directions, and those directions are to Nebraska.
A little place that Nick and Tom are already heading to. a place that they've all been dreaming, in a field of corn with a little old woman who we will meet right off the bat next episode. A wonderful woman, oldest woman in the world, Mother Abigail.
That's it for this episode of Derry Public Radio. As always, thank you for listening. Join us for our next episode, Part 3, as we will cover chapters 45 through 51. For Benjamin Graham and C.M. Alexander, I'm Joshua Kahn reminding you, no one can tell what goes on in between the person you were and the person you become. No one can chart that blue and lonely section of hell. There are no maps of the change. You just come out the other side, or you don't.
Hey everyone, Sam Alexander here. We hope you enjoyed The Stand Part 2. A bit of trivia for you. The Stand is kind of related to the short story Night Surf. It's an expanded and more detailed version of the scenario in Night Surf, and you can read a revised version of it in the book Night Shift. But does anyone know where you can read the original version? Tell us on our Facebook or Instagram at Derry Public Radio or Twitter at Derry Public. You can also email us derrypublicradio@gmail.com. The first person to post the correct answer gets the admiration, respect, and undying love of all those around you. Please visit our website, constantreaders.org, and check out our Patreon at patreon.com/derrypublicradio. We are really close to meeting a monthly goal. That means we'd be recording extra stuff for you to listen to. Read our posts about it to learn more. That's all for now. Goodbye, listeners.